It was a little past 7 o'clock, and I had soup quietly bubbling away on the stovetop. It was a peaceful Tuesday night, the kind that gently worked its way into me, familiar and comforting, with nothing to disturb it. As I gave the soup a stir, watching the steady movement of tomatoes and basil, I reached for my phone to glance at the clock. That's when the phone buzzed. A single, brief vibration. A text from my aunt. Aunt Lenora Wainwright was never one for sharing memes or casual bits of news. When her texts appeared, they tended to be straightforward notices about church. So, when I saw her name pop up, I figured it would be something routine. Maybe Aunt Lenora Wainwright had turned up an old photo from one of our wild Thanksgiving gatherings. Perhaps she was simply getting a jump on making Christmas arrangements. I wiped my hands on a towel and tapped the message open. There was a video inside. No explanation or description, just a shaky, vertical recording. For a moment, everything else faded into the background for me. All I could make out was the edge of someone's sofa, a section of a coffee table, and what appeared to be my mother's shoulder off to one side. I came close to closing the file. I suspected it might have been an accidental pocket recording, but then the voices came through loud and unmistakable. I should count myself lucky, my mother's tone crisp and offhand, as if remarking on the temperature outside. Without us, she wouldn't be anywhere. I stopped mixing. Instead of speeding up, my heartbeat slowed, as if my whole body hit pause so I could hear better. An absolute letdown. My father pitched in with a dry, humorless laugh. Still, at least she covers the expenses. The sound of their laughter followed. Too familiar, tangled together and dismissive. I gripped the phone tighter. If I ever quit sending cash, Aunt Lenora Wainwright's voice broke in, the same aunt who had just passed along this message to me. We'll just use guilt on her again. I'm far too gentle to refuse. The soup bubbled over, finished. I failed to realize it at first. Their voices weren't hushed. They made no attempt to conceal it. It wasn't meant to be funny. They weren't pretending. Their conversation was about me. Not a distant relative, not some made-up person, and not a misremembered story. I was the daughter who had taken care of my parents' rent for 4 years, who paid my brother's school fees 3 semesters, the person who silently transferred $370 only last month to fix a roof problem that conveniently matched up with my mother's birthday celebration. I stood frozen. Then, in an instant, it all disappeared. The words on the screen were suddenly gone. My aunt realized what she'd done. She attempted to retract her words, but the damage had already been done. I stayed motionless, barely allowing myself to breathe. I remained there, still gripping the spoon, as the pot boiled over and tomato sauce trailed down in slow, chaotic ribbons. The kitchen was heavy with the smell of burnt herbs, but I didn't catch a hint of their scent. Only their voices reached me. I should appreciate them. I never would have been much on my own. An absolute letdown. Too gentle to refuse anyone. I didn't shed a tear. That was the thing I hadn't expected. I wasn't even upset, only empty, as if the words had scooped out what was already brittle and left only an echo in their place. With care, I placed my phone on the counter as though it could easily break. The silence that followed was overwhelming. I pulled out a chair and just gazed at nothing at all. This was always the way of things, wasn't it? Never dramatic, never overt, just a steady stream of tiny, quiet withdrawals from my own reserve of self-worth. Guilt masquerading as kindness. Burdens disguised as family obligations. When I first sent money, my father had lost one of his contracts. I was 27, still scraping by on cereal for dinner much of the week, but he needed money to cover the rent. I wired the amount without hesitation. When my brother decided to leave college due to what he called burnout, my mother phoned me in tears. She insisted that he just needed some time off, and that he'd return shortly. That never happened. Yet I continued covering tuition for the next 3 semesters. Next, assistance was needed with paying for the car insurance, and after that, repairs on the roof, and then healthcare expenses. Somehow, each new request managed to arrive right after I'd received a work bonus, a tax refund, or even a modest raise. And every time, I agreed because they were my loved ones. That's how families are supposed to act. Isn't that right? Isn't it? Phrases from the video echoed over and over in my mind, drowning out reason. She would have nothing if it weren't for us. We'll make her feel guilty again. She's far too gentle. And the harshest truth, the one I despised facing, was that their assessment wasn't wrong. Not about that particular thing. I really had been too gentle. I had never refused them. Not even once. I kept reassuring myself that I was resilient, that I could handle more than most. If I just kept it all together for a bit longer, maybe someone would notice. Maybe they'd finally value it. But they ignored me entirely. What registered to them was only what I offered, and at this point, they assumed I was clueless about the video. Chances are they were already joking about it. Aunt Lenora Wainwright likely erased it once she caught on. She might have even phoned my mother afterward, telling her not to fret. I didn't notice anything. I pictured my aunt murmuring to herself. I was still oblivious. They were unaware I'd watched every moment. And holding on to that knowledge was all that remained for me. So I chose not to speak, not because I was scared, but because keeping quiet now felt like strength. And in 4 days, rent would be owed again. I refused to just send the money this time without thinking. This time my plan was to hold off. Friday morning arrived with a deep quiet I remembered so well and treasured. I awoke to sunlight seeping through the blinds, gentle and subdued. My apartment remained quiet, and unusually, so did my thoughts. Coffee was brewing in the kitchen, a steadying and familiar presence. I went about my routine, pour, stir, sip, but beneath the surface, I sensed a change within myself. I was no longer the same person I had been 4 nights ago. My phone vibrated shortly after 8:30 a.m. It was a message from my mother. "Good morning, love. Just wanted to let you know I'm thinking of you." I hoped her week was going all right. There was something almost amusing about how she so delicately worded these messages, as if coating a fishing hook in sweetness before casting it out. My mother never texted me simply to see how I was. There was always another reason. And as expected, 10 minutes later, I received a follow-up. "By the way, rent's due tomorrow. Could you send it today just to be safe, in case the bank is slow?" I looked at the phone's display, already feeling that automatic, well-worn impulse preparing my reply. Naturally, I promised I'd have it to her by noon, but then I hesitated. My finger lingered over the screen. An image of her flashed through my mind. At the table from that video, holding a wine glass, laughter bubbling out, too gentle to refuse anyone. I erased what I'd written and began again. "I can't this month." Just those 4 words. No apology, no elaboration, no emoji to make it easier. I pressed send and placed my phone face down beside my coffee. A whole minute slipped by. Then 2 vibrations. "What do you mean you can't?" There it was, fast and cutting. "No, are you all right?" She showed no interest, only shock. One more alert. "Morgan, this matters. We are relying on you. You understand, we don't have a backup right now." I stayed silent. I let her messages linger without response, just as her expectations had pressed on me for so long. Several moments later, a new notification appeared. It was from Aunt Lenora Wainwright. "Hey, sweetie. Your mother, Elaine Hilliard, is panicking. Are you all right?" The question nearly made me laugh. I'd been sending money to these folks for years on end, and the single time I didn't react immediately, their whole reality seemed to shift. They never once checked in to see if I was all right. Not a single time did they stop to consider if I might be the one in need. It was never truly about me at all. It was always about what I provided. I drew in a breath and began typing again. I mentioned that I had some surprise costs this month. I wasn't able to send anything. Apologies. That was the whole message. I didn't leave any opportunity for further discussion, no suggestion of negotiation. Then I muted my notifications and let the quiet settle in. What happened after that told me all I needed to know. The silence didn't last for long. That night, while I was doing the dishes, my screen lit up again. My mother, me, and unexpected expenses. What could possibly be more important? Was anything ever supposed to take precedence over my own family? I wiped my hands on a dish towel and watched the screen intently. She wasn't seeking a response. She was admonishing me, as if I'd broken some unspoken standard of devotion. Riley has no means to pay his rent, you realize. If he loses his apartment, that responsibility falls to me. There it was again, the guilt about my brother. Riley, who hadn't maintained a steady job in more than a year. Riley, who had called me in tears the night he claimed he was put out, though in reality, he hadn't been. He only wanted extra cash for concert tickets. Despite that, I wired the money anyway. My hands hovered over the phone, but I stopped myself from writing anything. Not just yet, I thought. We raised you, I reminded myself. We were there for you when you had nothing. Is this the thanks we get? I gritted my teeth. Back when I had no support, I managed on my own. I held down 3 different jobs all through college. I went hungry at times, missed out on vacations, and regularly sacrificed sleep. They weren't the ones who brought me up. What truly shaped me was their ever-increasing expectations. My phone vibrated once more. It was Aunt Lenora Wainwright. Sweetheart, don't go through with this. We're family after all. Elaine's just upset right now. You know how my mother can be. Just transfer the rent and everything will settle down. Settle, but for whom? I set the phone aside, filled a glass with water, and took slow sips as I observed the second hand glide across the wall clock. Each new message revealed something more. Our bond was never truly love. It was reliance. And as soon as that fragile connection weakened, a flood of guilt surged in, overwhelming me. Suddenly, my screen lit up again, this time not with a written message. Instead, a voice recording from Aunt Lenora Wainwright appeared. I sat there, gazing at it for several moments. Aunt Lenora had never left a voice message before. She did things the traditional way. Phone calls or meticulous texts, always heavy with commas. Yet this felt different. Pressing play, I let it begin. Her tone was taut and precise, not showing anger but strict self-control, which somehow felt even more unsettling. I truly have no clue what sort of stunt you believe you're pulling, but none of this is amusing, she said. My mother is at her wit's end, and my father is absolutely livid, and honestly, I can't fault them for that. I drew in a sharp, quick breath. You've always had, let's say, a certain lack of gratitude. But now, this crosses the line into outright selfishness. You're employed in a solid position. You don't actually require that money. Your whole family is having a hard time, and out of the blue, you're acting like none of it matters to you anymore. Her voice picked up a note of bitter humor. You owe them, I reminded myself. After all that's been done for me, giving me life, supporting me, and now I was just going to cut them off. Act like my mother, my father, and my brother didn't exist. I tightened my grip on the glass in my hand, but I kept the audio playing without stopping it. And don't be fooled into thinking they'll let this go. If your goal is to be, if that's the sort of person I am, that's fine. But don't come crawling back when you realize just how much you'll miss them. Because after you step over this line, her tone grew hushed, there is no return. That was the end of her message. I remained where I was, unmoving. There were no tears, no outburst, just a silence, and something much deeper than anger. It was something even colder than sorrow, a sudden sense of understanding. They never truly cared for me. I was invisible to them. To them, I was just an exchange. And when that exchange ended, I instantly lost my value. I placed the glass in the sink without a fuss and reached for my phone. Several more messages had arrived, but I ignored them. The knock sounded early, too early. That faint pre-dawn time when the world hasn't decided yet between slumber and awakening. Wrapped in my robe, I held a hot cup and gazed through the kitchen window. The knock came again, this time more insistent and piercing. There was no need for me to wonder. There were plenty of people in my life who appeared without warning, but only one ever insisted on coming inside without bothering to ask. I made my way to the entrance at a leisurely pace. I paused for a moment, my hand gripping the doorknob to steady myself. Then I swung open the door. Right in front of me stood my brother. He wore sweats and a hoodie that clearly hadn't touched a washing machine in weeks. His hair stuck out in every direction, and his eyes were ringed with red. I couldn't decide if the look came from pure exhaustion, fury, or maybe both at once. "Are you being for real right now?" he barked at me. "What exactly is happening with you?" I held back from responding immediately. Instead, I let myself rest against the frame of the doorway. "Morning to you as well," I replied softly. He let out a dismissive sound and raked his hands through his hair as if trying to physically keep himself together. "Stop that. Quit pretending like none of this is important. You blocked my mother. You blocked my aunt. You didn't send rent. You're just turning your back on us, acting like we don't matter." I cocked my head a little. "I'm not sure, Riley. Maybe I finally grew tired of being seen as an endless supply of money." His jaw grew tight. "Come on, not this argument again." I exhaled briefly, a noise that wasn't quite a laugh, more the sound fatigue makes. "Riley, seriously," he said, his voice getting louder. "I'm your brother. We're family. Do you remember everything my mother and my father have done for you?" Though my words were quiet, they hit with force. I watched the recording. He went still, his mouth opening, closing, and then opening once more. "Which recording?" When I smiled, there was no friendliness in it. "You know perfectly well which one I mean." He shifted, glancing aside, his hands clenching into fists. "All right, listen. It was never meant to be a big deal. We were only talking, just messing around. You're blowing this out of proportion." I kept my tone steady, refusing to shout. I didn't react one bit. We gathered around the table, sharing laughter over the idea that I wouldn't be much without your support. The way I knew you might manipulate me with guilt all over again was the punchline. "Can you even comprehend what it's like to listen to my own relatives talk about me like that?" He pressed his hands against his face, as if trying to erase the entire encounter. "Morgan." "No," I replied, straightening my posture. "If you need assistance, go earn a paycheck. If you're looking for help with your rent, maybe ask those who labeled me a letdown. I'm finished." For the first time, I found myself speechless. We both lingered there as the silent breeze drifted behind him. At last, his expression grew frosty. "Fine," he snapped. "Be selfish. Just don't come running back when you figure out there's no one left in your corner." I remained silent. I made no dramatic exit, didn't bang the door. Instead, I eased it shut. And for the first time in so many years, I let go of the guilt. Later that night, the sky took on the hue of scorched copper. The silence felt dense and unmoving, I sat at my desk, staring at an untouched document. The flashing cursor seemed to anticipate my words. What I wrote wasn't driven by vengeance, it was recollection. Item after item, I reviewed receipts, bank statements, water and power invoices, Venmo transactions, and frantic wire transfers marked as urgent. $590 went to my brother for his relocation costs. $1,180 was sent to my mother to handle her unplanned dental bill. $3,900 helped my father when his business overhaul collapsed, never acknowledged, plus countless other contributions, all dissolving together like stray change in another person's wallet. My purpose wasn't to request the money back. Instead, I needed to document the person I used to be. I began with a single sentence. Here is everything I offered you, under the belief it was love. I exported it as a PDF, attached it to an email, and included only one line in the message. This is the last thing I'll give. My debt is paid. I owe you nothing. No money, no silence, no favors, no threats. Just delivery. Next, I pulled up the old family group chat. I hadn't posted there in months, not since they ridiculed my promotion while requesting more money at the same time. I scrolled past my aunt's birthday pictures, the ones I was never asked to attend. Then I moved past my father's memes, mocking pointless degrees, and people with feelings. Then I typed, "You always talk about what you've done for me, but you never even wondered what I sacrificed to support you. You didn't require my help. You just took advantage of me. This will be the last message you ever receive from me. Do not reach out to me again." I pressed send, silenced the chat, and archived it. Afterward, I opened my phone contacts and scrolled, blocking each one. My mother, my father, my brother, my aunt. There was no bitterness, no sorrow, just distance. I placed the phone aside. What happened next wasn't dramatic. It wasn't like a movie. It was precise. In that quiet, I understood something obvious. They never really noticed me, only what I could offer them. And now that was gone, I could finally choose what remained in my life. No more clamor, no shame, just quiet. And a door shut. No need for a slam, just a gentle, secure lock. When day broke, the air felt a little colder. Somewhere nearby, a lawnmower buzzed from a couple of houses away. Life continued, oblivious and unconcerned. I was pouring a second mug of coffee when the alert appeared. A new voicemail from my mother. No accompanying text, not a single missed call, just a recording waiting there. I just looked at it for several seconds. My mother hadn't picked up the phone to call, hadn't sent a text since my email, hadn't reached out to my brother or tried a fresh contact or any guilt-soaked emoji. She'd simply left her voice behind. That alone told me she had probably rehearsed what she was about to say to me. I pressed the button to play the message. Her tone began soft and measured. "Morgan, darling, I don't understand what has come over you. We're all at a loss." There was a pause in her words, as if she needed a moment. "My father can't get any rest. Riley is unable to function. I'm doing my best to keep our family together, but you keep shutting us out as if we mean nothing to you." Then for just a brief instant, her voice trembled. I've always been a deeply feeling person, and she recognized that. Maybe we exchanged words that should not have been said. But disagreements come with being family. Family members depend on one another for support. I squeezed my eyelids shut. She was either unaware of what I'd experienced, or she was acting as if she wasn't. Regardless, it made no difference to me at this point. You might believe you're strong for distancing yourself, but in truth, you're leaving behind those who gave you life. Her message struck me with a chill. She wasn't pleading for anything. Instead, she was putting forth an argument. They brought me up. We made sure I was fed. We ensured I always had a place to live. That slips my mind sometimes. I forget the depth of their sacrifices when there was so little to give. There was another break in conversation. This time, her composure faltered. But perhaps it was never truly valued by me. It could be that this present-day version of myself, the one with a prestigious career and strong-willed beliefs, believes I've outgrown my family. There was a heavy stillness. After that came the most subdued statement yet. If I left now, I shouldn't think about returning. Not in moments when I needed their support. Not when I discovered the world was far less kind than they were. A click sounded. That marked the end. The video feed froze once more. I placed my phone down next to my coffee cup. My hand remained steady. My breathing was calm and even. For the first time, I realized I felt no obligation to respond to her. Not with words, nor even with a silent ache of guilt. I picked up a pen and grabbed whatever old receipt was nearby, still resting on the table. I took the counter from the previous night's file, flipped it over, and jotted down a single sentence. There was no anger or hurt in my words, only honesty. After that, I threw it away and stepped outside to greet the start of the day, realizing that my own voice was finally the only one that counted. She didn't send me any more messages. There were no knocks on my door, no missed calls, no last attempts to meet. I realized their silent departure no longer filled me with dread. I actually felt like I deserved it. Sometimes in the evenings, I found myself strolling by the rows of unread books on my shelves. But now, at last, I could sit down with them. When I made meals just for myself, the food seemed to taste richer in some way. The stillness around me stopped feeling like emptiness and became a comforting companion I could rely on. There were no more bills hanging over my head. I was done typing out midnight apologies, hoping to smooth over somebody else's outburst. And I no longer had to justify why I refused to bankroll their mess. Above all, I no longer had to question whether I was important to them. Now I understood the truth. Their affection wasn't for me, but for whatever I brought into their lives. As soon as I withheld what they wanted, their act fell away. So I let go of my own act as well. I didn't end things with anger, vengeance, public call-outs, or dramatic gestures, just by quietly closing a door and locking it, having realized that I never actually needed their approval to leave. They brought up a daughter strong enough to make it on her own. What they hadn't expected was that I would manage just fine without them. But I managed. In the peace that came with that success, a smile crept onto my face, not for their benefit, not for the sake of an audience, simply for myself.